Good morning, folks. It's Sunday morning, and I'm going to talk about another underrated band. Sorry, I just need my coffee. This band, um, I feel like the Moody Blues. You know, they're different styles, but I feel like this band should get a lot more love than they do. Similar to the Moody Blues. This band, I think, influenced other bands more than people realize or maybe want to admit. The band is Iron Butterfly, and I love Iron Butterfly. And I'm going to talk a little bit about their albums. I have a couple of their vinyl albums, and I have all their CDs. So I'll show you the vinyl I have, and I'll talk about their other albums as well. So their first album was called Heavy, and it came out way back in 1968. And what separated Iron Butterfly was you had a lead singer named Doug Engel, and he also played the church organ. So those two things combined gave them a very unique sound. I think not I think I know bands were using the Hammond B3 organ, and obviously other bands had emotional singers as well. But I feel like Doug Engel had this voice that was very, very emotional when he sang. He brought a lot of emotion to the music. He brought an energy to the music that other singers ended up, I feel like, copying after that. But he, I think, was one of the first with one of those real, just powerful, you know, energetic vocals that just added to the music. And his, organ playing. And again, I'm not sure, I don't know too much about, the Hammond B3 organ or other types of organs along those lines, or electrical, keyboards or things like that. But it sounds like a church organ when you hear it, and it's the coolest sound. So Heavy came out in 1968. Three songs that jump out to me on that album: you have Possession, Unconscious Power, and then at the end of that album, there's a song called the Iron Butterfly Theme. And you hear, especially in Iron Butterfly Theme, you hear the beginnings of hard rock and heavy metal in that song. So again, I've talked about other bands like Blue Cheer, Budgie, early Judas Priest, early Scorpions, of course, early Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, things like that. We have to group Iron Butterfly into that mixture. Because I'm telling you, listen to the song Iron Butterfly Theme. It came out in 1968. If that song doesn't scream hard rock and beginnings of early heavy metal, I don't know what does. I think I remember seeing on that first album the reason they called themselves Iron Butterfly, because iron, of course, was something heavy, as in sound, and butterfly was light and, a little bit more ethereal. So they brought those light and dark shades to their music, which I thought was very cool as well. So Heavy came out in 1968. Now, the next album, which is the album that people know Iron Butterfly for, the one song, and it's a good one, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. Now, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida came out in 1968, and here is the album. And I remember getting this as a kid in the 80s for the song In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, because that was the only song that I knew. And I remember looking at this cover, and you know exactly what you're going to get when you look at the front cover. I mean, this is psychedelic. You can see, obviously the band here is deep into their sound. I love the psychedelic artwork and the backdrop and the videos that they have going on behind them. So you're in for a treat when you listen to this. I love the font too. I want to say the band. Remember Elf with Ronnie James Dio as the vocalist? I want to say Carolina County Ball, I think, was one of their albums. I want to say they used that same font. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you can comment on the section below. This was the back cover for In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. I love these early albums because they definitely, I mean, they literally introduce you to the band. So they give you a little, bio of each band member. You've got Eric Braun on guitar. He was 17 years old when this album came out. Lee Dorman on bass, Ron Bushy on drums, and of course Doug Engel on the organ and vocals. It says here that Doug's father was a church organist, and much of the classical influence of the church is evident in the writing. So, hey, I must have remembered reading that somewhere, because definitely you get that church organ vibe, and it comes through the music. I think this is the only band, to my knowledge, that incorporated the church organ into their music. But this album, I mean, every song, most anything that you want. Oh, this is what I was going to say about this album. I feel like, in my opinion here, that this album builds. And I remember thinking this as a kid. Like, it starts out, I feel like each song gets heavier and heavier and heavier to that top of the mountain for In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. So, side one, you've got Most Anything That You Want. 2, Flowers and Beads, which is a great hippie song. 3, My Mirage, which is awesome. 4, Termination. And 5, Are You Happy? Listen to the drums in Are You Happy? Are you happy? Alright, I'm sorry. Anyway, that song is a great closer to side one. So you got those 5 strong songs. I feel like they build. Are You Happy is really heavy. And then all of side 2, 17 minutes and 5 seconds of In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. That song is awesome. There was a single release of that too. I think it was like 3 or 4 minutes long. But you gotta listen to the 17-minute version of In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. I mean, that guitar lick, hard rock, heavy metal right there. 1968, that song came out. Drum solo? I don't know. Help me out. Are there any other songs from the 1960s that were recorded that have long drum solos in them? I don't know. Maybe this was one of the first songs that did that. I remember talking to my parents about that song, and they said at college parties, people would dance to that tune. So, college kids in the late 60s were playing that at frat parties and dancing to that song. So, I mean, that was a huge song for them. And it was a huge song for the era. And like I said, I think that song influenced a lot of people. And the proof is in the pudding, because here we go. I'm going to tell you something. The band Slayer covered the song In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. I think it was on the Less Than Zero soundtrack. But if you have not heard Slayer's version of In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, you got to hear it. So look that up on YouTube. Just goes to show you, metal bands, whether they want to admit it or not, were influenced by Iron Butterfly. So, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. This happens to be the 180 gram version on, I believe, some sort of a splatter vinyl. Oh yeah, sort of a psychedelic look to the vinyl. I think it sounds great. I used to have a pressing that came out in the early 80s. I don't have that anymore. I have not listened to an original pressing of this album, but I feel like this pressing sounds really good. So, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. All right, their next album, we're still in the 60s, friends, is Ball. And Ball came out in 1969. And I want to say, after In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, Ball went under the radar. But you know what? Ball is actually my favorite Iron Butterfly album. I remember, now this isn't the original album that I picked up, but I remember getting this album in a thrift store back when I was in junior high school. And of course, I knew Iron Butterfly because I had In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida already. But I saw this album and I'm like, wait a second, that's an Iron Butterfly album. I was drawn to how they wrote the band and obviously the title Ball. You have the band members on the back. And when I listened to this album, I was like, wow, that's as good or even better than In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. So what songs do we have on here? Well, side one, you've got In the Time of Our Lives, very heavy. Soul Experience, Lonely Boy. That's a real soulful song. Doug Engel shows you his vocal abilities on that song. Real Fright, In the Crowds. Side two. Let me just pull out the record here. It's on the Atco label. This record feels good too. It's a nice feel to it. Side two, It Must Be Love, her favorite style. Filled with Fear, which is a great song, and it ends with Beldebeest. Beldebeest is a cool tune too. It's written by Eric Braun. And, I feel like this album, to me, when I first heard it, like I said, I'm like, ooh, this could be as good or even better than In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. And I actually think that this album has probably aged better than In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. And I think it's an album that a lot of people have never kind of maybe given a chance. Maybe they really liked In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, and they never listened to Ball. But I'm telling you right now, if you like In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, you're going to like Ball. And you might even like Ball better. I like Ball better. I think it flows better. But that's just me. Again, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida is classic. Ball is as well. Really, those two are interchangeable for me. All right, so after Ball, you had an album called Metamorphosis. I have it on CD. I do not have it on vinyl. Metamorphosis came out in 1970. And with that album, they changed their sound. I feel like they went for more of a... Definitely, it's got an early 70s hard rock vibe to it. I want to say it's almost got like a biker vibe to it. I can't, for lack of like a better descriptive term, I feel like biker rock. I picture people on, motorcycles listening to Metamorphosis. It's got that vibe to it. It's a good album. I mean, it's not, for me, it's not as good as In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida and Ball. But, three songs that jump out to me from that album: Free Flight, New Day, and Stone Believer. So those three songs are good. Sorry, I need to take another sip here. Liquid energy. All right, so after Metamorphosis, there's a great live album, and it's actually just called Live. It came out in 1970. They do a great live version of In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. It's got a lot of energy. It's a good sounding recording. So if you want to hear a really good representation of Iron Butterfly live, listen to that album. Again, it came out in 1970. Now, after that, Iron Butterfly kind of fizzled out. They kind of, the butterfly flew. It flew somewhere else. But later on, there were two albums that came out in the 70s after the live album. Those two albums are Scorching Beauty and Sun and Steel. Now, I knew about these albums and I never listened to them for the longest time. And the one reason I didn't is because I knew that Doug Engel was no longer part of the band. He left. Eric Braun, the guitarist, took over on vocals. Now, he has a very different sort of vocal take, shall I say, on the songs. I'm not a big fan of his vocals. I like Doug Engel better. I feel like the songs on Scorching Beauty and Sun and Steel are not as strong. I mean, there's a few that are pretty good, but for me, I don't really listen to those albums that often. I have them on CD. I might have listened to them once, and then I'm like, it just doesn't really do anything for me. Like, I need that classic Doug Engel church organ led Iron Butterfly. So that's Iron Butterfly for me. Again, they came out in 1968 with Heavy, great album. I still think they were trying to find their sound for that album. But again, the highlight for that, listen to Iron Butterfly theme. I feel like that just shows you everything about the beginnings of hard rock and heavy metal. Then you have the two classic albums from the 60s as well. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida in 68, Ball in 69. If you have not listened to Ball, you got to listen to that. And then in 1970, they entered that decade with the album Metamorphosis. Still a great album. Again, for me, not as strong as In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida and Ball, and it has more of like a biker rock vibe to it, but still a good album. And then you had the live album in 1970. And then after that, of course, you had Scorching Beauty and Sun and Steel, but Doug Engel was not part of that band. So that's Iron Butterfly. And hopefully you enjoyed the video. Press the like button, comment below, and spread the word, because I am part of the vinyl community now. And I'm going to be giving you some of my opinions and feelings about certain records and CDs, and I'll even be singing some songs for you as well. So hopefully you have a good day, and I'll talk to you later.